How to rig an albacore, the Toronto Island Sailing Club way. The first place you should go is the sign-out board to check that your boat isn't out of service. If it looks good, then find the name tags of yourself and your fellow sailors and place them under your boat number. Next is the sign-out book. Here you should do another check for the boat being out of service or having any major issues that you should know about. If everything checks out, then write down the names of every person that will be in the boat. Also, it's important to note your departure time and the area where you will be sailing, so in case you don't make it back, we will know when and where to rescue you. Now let's head over to the boat. First take the dolly down off its pole, then uncleat all remotes on both sides. If your boat has an easily detachable boom vang, detach it now. This is simply for convenience. Doing this now will give you more room to maneuver when you are doing the on-water rigging in a minute. Now unravel the main sheet off the boom and most importantly, uncleat it, and make sure that there's some slack between the block and the boom. Then unattach the rudder leash and whatever other lines may be strung up at the rear of the boom. Now find the transom flap bungee. This is the line that holds shut the clear plastic flaps in the stern of the boat, preventing water from coming in. Hook the transom flap bungee onto its hook in the floor of the boat. If there is no dedicated hook for this, you can use whatever else is in reach to hook on, such as a hiking strap. It is important that it is attached to something and that the transom flaps are snug against the stern of the boat and free of any obstructions that would let water in. Now close the two rear buoyancy tank plugs and the one front plug. If you can't reach the front plug, then this can be left until you are rigging on the water. To make the angle less awkward for your fingers, you can uncleat the mast bend line if that's obstructing it, as long as you tighten and cleat it again after you've closed the plug. Now it is time to lower the boom. In the de-rigged state, the boom is held up by the main halyard, which is attached to the rear of the boom. The cleat for the main halyard is inside the boat, on the mast, starboard side. Uncleat it and make sure it's entirely outside of its jam cleat before you start to feed the line through, lowering the boom. While the line will technically move that way even if it's still inside the jam cleat, doing this drastically reduces the service life of that jam cleat, so please don't do it. Lower the boom slowly and carefully onto the port side of the boat like so. Now or at some point, you will need to retrieve a few more pieces of the boat. Use only the rudder and tiller that have your boat number on them. Also get 2 paddles, any 2 will do. And make sure that your boat either has a safety kit in it already or get one from the boathouse. As an aside, the smartest way to stow paddles in the boat is like so, with the paddle blade not tucked entirely underneath the gunnel, but protruding inward from it. You'll find that the paddle will reach the point of being wedged snugly sooner, and not as far forward, when stowed in this way, and thus it will be easier to retrieve it and restow it on the water, especially with one hand, or while you're busy looking at something else. Now it's time to put the rudder onto the boat. From this point forward, it's important to keep in mind that if at any time you lift the front of the dolly too high off the ground, you will bang the rudder into the ground, and risk damaging it. Now put the tiller into the rudder, line up some holes on them, and put the pin through them. There may be several holes on the rudder and tiller. It's not critical which ones you line up, as long as the pin fits. Be sure that the tiller is under the main sheet bridle at this point, not over it, because in a minute the boom, and hence the main sheet bridle with it, will be raised, and will need to move freely between each side of the boat. It can't do that if the main sheet bridle is caught underneath the tiller. Next, attach the rudder leash. This is important in case the rudder falls off in the water, as these rudders don't float and they are expensive. Now get the sails from the sail shed. Use the sails for your boat number only. You may run into rigging problems, especially with the jib, if you use the wrong boat's sails. If the previous user of your boat put the sails in the bag correctly, then you should be able to place the sail bag on the boat like so, and when you pull the bag off, the front of the mainsail will be conveniently located at the front of the boat. Start the mainsail bolt rope in the boom track. Then get one person to grab the mainsail and walk it to the stern of the boat while the other person holds the boom steady. Unroll the mainsail enough to free the jib, then take the jib to the front of the boat. The other person can go and attach the jib at this point, but first we'll show what remains to be done with the mainsail. You'll need to deal with the outhaul. That's the line ending in a shackle at the rear of the boom which will hold the clew. That's the rear corner of the mainsail. In the de-rigged state, the outhaul shackle is holding the main halyard. Detach the main halyard and hold it in your hand while you attach the outhaul shackle to the clew. Now with the main halyard in your hand, find the head of the mainsail and attach the main halyard to it like so. Start the mainsail on the mast track, remove the slack from the main halyard, and raise the main to a position just a few inches above the bottom of the track. You don't want to raise the main too much at this point, as a strong wind could then tip the boat over while it's still on land. Now that you are finished with the mainsail rigging on land, it's time for the jib. First, locate the tack of the jib, that is, the front corner of it. If you are having trouble figuring out which corner is the tack when the jib is bunched up like this, remember that the front edge of the jib has a prominent wire in it, and the bottom edge is curved. Now attach the tack to the pin provided for it at the very front of the boat. Be warned that the split rings on this pin are often difficult to work with. Then take the jib sheet shackle and attach it to the clew, that is, the lower rear corner, of the jib. It is important that if there is a wire loop of any kind at the jib clew, do not attach the jib sheet to it. That loop is for the jib stick. So attach the jib sheet to the grommet directly. Now attach the head, that's the top corner, of the jib to the jib halyard, which should be in its de-rigged position attached to the mast. If there is a wire extension and loop to attach to here, do make use of it and attach the jib halyard to that wire loop. Now it's time to raise the jib via the jib halyard. The jib halyard has a remote control, customarily the frontmost remote. So you will need to take the slack out of and cleat this remote before attempting to raise the jib. You raise the jib by pulling on the rope that goes up the inside of the mast and is attached to the jib halyard. You need to pull on this rope until you see the other end of the jib halyard come out of the mast. It is important that you pull on this rope only through the S-hook on the jib halyard cascade, as pulling it from any other angle will cause the rope to rub against the edges of the hole in the mast, thus fraying it. Now hook that S-hook onto the wire loop at the end of the jib halyard proper. If it won't reach, uncleat the jib halyard remote and pull some slack through, via any length of that line that you can see, between the remote and the cascade, until the S-hook will reach the loop. To stow the jib halyard's rope, make sure it is clear of the S-hook to avoid fraying. Then wrap it in loops and stow it under the bungee on the mast. The on-land portion of rigging is now complete. We are now ready to put the boat in the water and finish rigging there. Put the boat in the water on the leeward side of the dock so that the wind will blow it away from the dock rather than into it. You can have someone hold the painter by hand, or you can tie it to a ring on the dock with a mooring hitch or a slipped buntline hitch like so. Now it's time to get into the boat. Only one person should get into the boat at this time, and the first thing they should do is make the boat more stable by lowering the centerboard into the water at least halfway. If the water you are in is deep enough, feel free to lower it all the way right now. Depending on your boat, your centerboard may or may not stay put where you place it, so you may need to cleat it at this point. Next, raise the mainsail. Since you already started the mainsail bolt rope into the track and the mast, this should be straightforward. Pull the main halyard until the boom is more or less even with the gooseneck on the mast. If you have trouble raising the main that far, then you have likely done something wrong. Look at the rear of the boom. Is the main sheet bridle caught underneath the tiller? If so, detach and reattach the tiller where it ought to be, beneath the bridle. Another frequent problem at this point is the bolt rope jamming on its way into the mast track. Assuming that you are able to figure out how to raise the main far enough so that the boom is even with the gooseneck, cleat the main halyard to free up your hands so that you can put the boom onto the gooseneck as shown. Also, while you're here, attach the Cunningham to the mainsail. Now, assuming that your mainsail is all the way up, it's time to cleat the main halyard for good. Cleat it in the jam cleat, then around the horn cleat with 2 rounds, followed by a figure 8, followed by another round. As long as the main halyard is secure, no knot is necessary. In fact, a knot here is actually undesirable, as it will make it more difficult to lower the main on the water in a hurry, as one will have to do upon returning to the dock or in an emergency. Now wrap up the access line and stow it under the bungee on the mast. Now it is time to reattach your boom bang if you detached it on land earlier. Now that the mainsail is fully attached, you need to tighten the remotes an appropriate amount. The amount that each of these should be tightened is an entire subject in itself, but for beginners, just be sure to tighten the jib halyard a lot, until it requires significant effort to pull anymore. Then tighten the other remotes only a moderate amount, generally more tight in high wind and less tight in low wind. Now you can put your rudder down into the water. Assuming that you put your tiller on correctly earlier, that is, beneath the main sheet bridle, this should be easy to do. Move your boat to the end of the dock if you aren't there already. Also, if you have not yet lowered your centerboard fully, do so now. You are now ready to leave the dock. In the channel at TISC, the wind tends to travel along the channel, either one way or the other, not across it. This lends some predictability to the situation. Depart from the dock starting head to wind, and make the boat turn quickly into a close-hauled point of sail by pulling the jib in tight, in addition to the crew pushing the bow away from the dock as they step into the boat. In these first few seconds after leaving the dock, it is crucial to get into a close-hauled position and start sailing effectively right away, rather than stay in irons and at best drift uselessly, as will happen in a light wind, or at worst drift quickly backwards and into the beach or our powerboat dock, as will happen in a heavy wind. It is difficult to move the bow enough to get into the close-hauled point of sail at this time by a push off the dock alone. Therefore, pulling the jib in tight to accomplish this is strongly recommended. This is one of the few times when it is appropriate for the helm to handle the jib sheet, as the crew will be busy at first getting settled in the boat and stowing the painter. You are now sailing. The standard way to return to the dock at TISC is as follows. Approach the dock from upwind, and lower the mainsail when you are within a few boat lengths of the dock. Aim at the end of the dock and send the crew, with painter in hand, out onto the bow. The crew should be sitting far enough forward, and their feet should be positioned in such a way that they can step onto the dock without having to scoot forward at the last second. You are now home. The end.